Hello, my name is Roisin and welcome back to my channel. So in today's video I am going to be predicting the 13 books that I think will make it on to the Booker Prize shortlist. Now there are sometimes 12, sometimes 13 books on this shortlist, but I'm going to go for 13 to give myself some leeway. And I did predict the Women's Prize shortlist earlier. Longlist, I keep saying shortlist. I'm predicting the Booker Prize longlist, and I did predict the Women's Prize longlist earlier in the year, which I'll leave linked in the cards above. But I feel like I am less knowledgeable about the Booker Prize. I feel like this is much more speculative. I have no idea what I'm talking about. The Booker Prize is a prize awarded for a book that is perceived to be the best book in English published between October 2020, 1st of October 2021 and the 30th of September 2022, I think. So that's the range we are given. Booker Prize books tend to be fairly literary. They can be a little bit experimental. Lincoln in the Bardo, for example, won the Booker Prize. And I have read and loved a lot of Booker Prize books in the past, from shortlists and winners, but I don't think I really know what they look for in a long list, what kind of they're trying to put in there. So I've gone for a range, I think. Some more established people who've either won the Booker or been shortlisted before, some debut novels, some things that are a little more commercial, some things that are a little more genre, and we'll see how well I do. I don't think I'm going to do particularly well at all. I didn't do that well at the Women's Prize. I think I got like a quarter of them, so we'll see how I do with the Booker. So without further ado, let's get into the 12 books I've got on my list. I also hasten to add, I have not read most of these books, so I'm going off of what I've heard other people say about them and the general hype and vibe. The first one on my list is Young Mungo by Douglas Stuart, and Douglas Stuart won the Booker Prize 2 years ago with his debut novel Shuggie Bain, which was raved about. This is his second novel, and I think, well, from what I've heard, a lot of people who read Shuggie Bain and just thought it was okay are loving Young Mungo more, which has made me think that it might end up on the list for that reason. Booker definitely puts people on the list more than one. For example, Hilary Mantel won for Wolfhall and Bring Up the Bodies, so it's definitely a thing. Like, it doesn't matter that he's been on the shortlist recently, and also it shows that the Booker Prize likes his style of writing. So this one is about a housing estate in Glasgow, where Mungo and James are born under different stars. Mungo is a Protestant and James is a Catholic. Yet against all odds they become best friends as they find sanctuary in the pigeon dovecot that James has built for his racing birds. They fall in love, they dream of finding somewhere they belong. So it's about, obviously, a queer coming of age story set in Glasgow about two working class boys. I believe that Shuggie Bain was also set in Glasgow about a working class gay boy, so I guess it has similar vibes in that way, but obviously it's not the same story. But yeah, mostly it's because I know that his writing works for the Booker, and people have been, I think, praising this one a lot higher than the other one. I thought about reading Shuggie Bain, but I never really ended up going there. It was a bit, I just heard such mixed reviews of it that I wasn't sure that it was going to be for me. But this one, the second one, I've definitely heard much more positive things about. The second one on my list is one that was on my anticipated releases when I first heard about it, and that is The Colony by Audrey Magee. It's also one that someone, I'm sorry, I forget, has been telling me to read in my comments, and this one is described as a allegory of the Troubles, and there is another book on here that is about the Troubles as well. I don't know if that's like a personal bias thing. My mum, as I've mentioned before, is from Derry, so I've been wanting to read more books about the Troubles. This one is not directly about them though. This is about a small island off the coast of Ireland, and I love small islands, and it's about an English painter who rose off to the island, which is inhabited by fewer than 100 people who speak Irish. But unbeknownst to him, Mr. Mason also arrives for the summer. Okay, I can't seem to find a simple description of this book online. Everything's really vague and weird, but I know that there is about this French guy who's trying to record the Irish language, but the way that he's interacting with the people who speak Irish as a native language is affecting their language. So yeah, it's about this painter, this English guy who doesn't, and this French guy, and they kind of have different opinions on what should be done about the interaction between people who live on this isolated island and speak Irish to each other, and the outside world. and there's a clash there. As I was saying, the descriptions are really vague and very different from one another, so it was hard to find a proper summing up, and I haven't read it, but I have heard people talking about this one, really liking this one, and I think it's a bit weird, which is also something that I like. I think it's set in 1979. A vivid and memorable book about art, land and language, love and sex, youth and age. Big ideas tread lightly through Audrey Magee's strong prose. And I think big ideas and strong prose are two things that feel Booker-ish for me. Number 3 is Love Marriage by Monica Ali. Now, Monica Ali was shortlisted for Brick Lane, which was her debut novel, and this is her 5th novel. So she, again, is a writer that we know. So she's another writer who the Booker Prize have honoured before. This is set in present-day London about Yasmin, who is a 26-year-old and training to be a doctor like her Indian-born father, and engaged with the charismatic, upper-class Joe, whose formidable mother, Harriet, is a famous feminist. The gulf between the families is vast, so too is the gulf in sexual experience between Yasmin and Joe. As the wedding day draws near, misunderstandings, infidelities and long-held secrets upend both Yasmin's relationship and that of her parents, a love marriage according to the family law that Yasmin has believed all her life. So another one dealing with like identity and family and themes of that nature. Number 4 on my list is one that I have seen loved absolutely everywhere, and I wasn't sure it was eligible, but I think that the UK publishing date makes it eligible. It's just been out for a lot longer in the US, and that is The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois or Du Bois. I've heard people say it both ways, and I'm not sure if it's Du Bois or Du Bois. But this is a debut novel by a poet, and I have another one of those on this list as well. I think that language and like a consciousness of language and playing with form are things that I've noticed in a lot of the Booker books I've read, and I think it's also something that I've noticed in books that poets have written. This is a chunky book, really long, and I think it was longlisted for the Women's Prize, but it didn't get shortlisted. So I read that shortlist and I haven't read this book, but it is one that I've seen lots of people really loving and praising. This is about Du Bois' idea of double consciousness, and this is kind of an epic about a young girl from an early age who struggles to feel like she belongs, made all the more difficult by a hovering trauma, as well as the whispers of women, her mother, her sisters, and her maternal line reaching back 2 centuries. Ailey decides to embark on a journey through her family's past, uncovering the shocking tales of generations of ancestors, Indigenous, black and white, in the Deep South. In doing so, she must learn to embrace her full heritage, a legacy of oppression and resistance, bondage and independence, cruelty and resilience that is the story and song of America itself. Oh, so it was a long list of the Aspen. Maybe it wasn't the Women's Prize, maybe it was the Aspen Prize. But yeah, another one that as I said, I've heard so many people praising, and that's why I put it on the list. Next is one that I'm not so sure about, but this is Trespasses by Louise Kennedy, and this is her debut novel again, and this is the other one that's about the Troubles. I'm not too sure because I think it might be a bit more commercial. It's kind of a love story meets a thriller. That's the way it's been described anyway. But it has been like linked with young Mungo and stuff, so I don't know. The blurbs, the quotes are by Emma Donoghue and Sarah Moss and Marion Keyes and Nick Hornby, so you can see like there's like the literary people and then the more like commercial people in there as well. So it's one that might be more on the line. I can't find a description of it, just loads and loads of quotes. There is nothing special about the day Kushla meets Michael, a married man from Belfast, in the pub owned by her family. But here, love is never far from violence, and this encounter will change both of their lives forever. As people get up each morning and go to work, school, church, or the pub, the daily news rolls in of another car bomb exploded, another man beaten, killed, or left for dead. In the class Kushla teaches, the vocabulary of 7-year-old children now includes phrases like petrol bomb and rubber bullets. As she is forced to tread lines she never thought she would cross, tensions in the town are escalating, threatening to destroy all that she is working to hold together. I have really noticed a lot more books about the Troubles and about the North of Ireland in recent years, and I don't know if it's 25 years since the Good Friday Agreement, or if it's like more popular, or it's just me noticing it, but it is something that I've noticed. Okay, another one by someone who has been shortlisted before is The Last White Man by Mohsin Hamid, who was known for so his books, The Reluctant Fundamentalist and Exit West, were both shortlisted for the prize before. One morning, Anders wakes to find his skin has turned dark, his reflection a stranger to him. At first he only tells Una, an old friend, newly a lover. Soon reports of similar occurrences surface across the land. Some see in the transformations the long-dreaded overturning of an established order to be resisted to the bitter end. In many, like Anders' father and Una's mother, a sense of profound loss wars with profound love. As the bond between Anders and Una deepens, changes take on a different shading, chance to see one another face to face anew. Yeah, so it sounds like it's a bit more like sci-fi, kind of, but I don't know if it's going to be explained, so it might just be more of a metaphorical thing. But it's yeah, it sounds like it's a bit more interesting, a bit weird, and there's definitely often some weird books. I have read some weird books that have been on the Booker Prize shortlist before. Another author who's been shortlisted before is Noviolet Bulawayo, and her new novel Glory is one that I think might be on the long list this year. Noviolet Bulawayo is an author that I meant to read when I was reading books from Southern Africa. She is a Zimbabwean author, and she was previously shortlisted for We Need New Names, but I had trouble like sourcing her books. They weren't in the library, which is a shame. I remember last year there was a lot of talk, because Damon Galgut won, about it being a good year for African fiction, and I think David Diop also won the International Prize, who is a Senegalese author. So I think that the prize often has people on the long list from like not just the UK and US, so they've been like branching out. I think, as I said before, I don't know that much about the prize, so I am kind of just making assumptions here. Noviolet Bulawayo is one of the ones that was, when I was doing my research for reading books from Southern Africa, she's really well praised, and I haven't heard much about this new book. It was on my anticipated releases video, but I haven't heard that many. I don't think I know anyone who's read it. A long time ago, in a bountiful land not so far away, the animal denizens lived quite happily. Then the colonisers arrived. After nearly 100 years, a bloody war of liberation brought new hope for the animals, along with a new leader. A charismatic horse who commanded the sun and ruled and kept on ruling. For 40 years, with the help of his elite band of chosen ones, a scandalously violent pack of defenders, and, as he aged, his beloved and ambitious donkey wife, Marvellous. But even the sticks and stones know there is no night, ever so long, that does not end with the dawn. And so it did for the old horse. One day as he sat down to his Earl Grey tea and favourite radio programme, a new regime, a new leader, or apparently so, and once again the animals were full of hope. So again, this is an allegory for colonialism and for, I think, like related to Zimbabwean history, as well as other sort of related post-colonial African histories. So yeah, sounds interesting, a bit weird, but I know they don't shy away from weird. Now we have the first one on the list that I've actually read, and that is The Magician by Colm Toibin. This is his book about Thomas Mann, which I read earlier on in the year when I was reading some of the best-selling historical fiction. I'll leave that vlog linked in the cards above. And I really enjoyed it. I thought that his writing was really masterful and beautiful. I enjoyed the way that he portrayed characters. It's a very slow-moving book about Thomas Mann, who was a historical fiction writer from Germany, beginning in his childhood in the late 19th century through to his fleeing to America during the rise of the Nazis, and his kind of ambivalent political opinions, and as well as his personal life. And it had this cast of kind of wacky characters who were his family, who were quite out there. So it was quite humorous, but also poignant and sad. And I really enjoyed that book. It's one of my favourite books that I've read this year. And he's been shortlisted before for The Blackwater Lightship, The Testament of Mary, and The Master, and also longlisted for Brooklyn. So he's someone who gets on these lists fairly often, and I think The Magician is really good. It's been described as one of his best, so I think possibly he will be longlisted for that one. Another person who has a book that's been called his best book yet, although this person has not actually been shortlisted before, but this is Crossroads by Jonathan Franzen. And this is another one that I've seen loads of people reading on BookTube and really, really loving. And there were people who'd not read Franzen before, kind of not been interested in his style before, but picked it up this year, and the hype has just been really big around it. So I'm wondering if, even though he's never been longlisted for the book before, this one might be the one that does it. It's another big family epic. A lot of these books actually are quite long. I don't know, who knows if the judges will agree with me. Crossroads is set in 1971. Heavy weather is forecast for Chicago. The associate pastor of a liberal suburban church is on the brink of breaking free from a marriage he finds joyless, unless his wife, who has her own secret, beats him to it. The eldest child is coming home from college on fire with moral absolutism, having taken an action that will shatter his father. His sister Becky, long the social queen of a high school class, has sharply veered into the counterculture, while their brilliant young brother Perry, who's been selling drugs to 7th graders, has resolved to be a better person. Each of the Hildebrands seeks a freedom that each of the others threatens to complicate. So it's a big family epic, really long, big chunky book, like I said, but also everybody has been loving it, and particularly loving Franzen's writing, so I think that he might end up on the list. Next we have a sci-fi fantasy novel. There's not often genre fiction on the Booker shortlist, but this is a literary sci-fi fantasy, and there's definitely been that before. I'm pretty sure Never Let Me Go was a Booker book. I think. So this is, I think, a more literary one, and another one that I've just seen all over Bookstagram. This is How High We Go in the Dark by Sequoia Nagamatsu. And Cloud Atlas. Cloud Atlas has been described as being for fans of Cloud Atlas, and I'm pretty sure that David Mitchell has been shortlisted before as well for, maybe it was Cloud Atlas, or maybe it was the other one. Dr. Cliff Miyashiro arrives at the Arctic Circle to continue his recently deceased daughter's research, only to discover a virus, newly unearthed from the melting permafrost. The plague unleashed reshapes life on Earth for generations. Yet even while struggling to counter his destructive force, humanity stubbornly persists in myriad moving and inventive ways. Among those adjusting to this new normal are an aspiring comedian who falls in love with a mother trying desperately to keep her son alive, a scientist who, having failed to save his own son from the plague, gets a second chance at fatherhood when one of his test subjects, a pig, develops human speech. A man, after recovering from his own coma, plans a block party for his neighbours, who've also woken up to find they have survived their families, and a widowed painter and her teenage granddaughter who must set off on a cosmic quest to locate a new home planet. So, bizarre and weird, and obviously plaguey. I've got another book on here that has is also plaguey, but it's a bit more straightforward. This one's a bit out there and a bit weird. I'm hoping they put something a bit weird on the list. I would like to read some more weird books. So the next one is the one that is plaguey as well, and that is The Sentence by Louise Erdrich. This one was shortlisted for the Women's Prize, so I read it when I was reading those. And if I haven't already linked that in the cards, it will be there now. And it was my favourite off of the shortlist, which is the reason that I'm putting it on this list. I think Louise Erdrich is a well-known writer. I don't think she's ever been longlisted for the Booker before, but I really enjoyed this book. It is kind of part ghost story, part pandemic novel, about Tuki, a woman who at the very beginning is arrested for a crime she doesn't know she's committing, and then we jump forward to when she's been released from prison and she's working in a bookshop in the Midwest, and one of the customers has died, and this woman always wanted to be an Indigenous person but wasn't, and kind of tried to ingratiate herself into Indigenous culture. Tuki is Indigenous, and this is an Indigenous bookshop, and it's about the experience of the bookshop being haunted by this woman who has passed, but also of this bookshop living through the pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement. And it's a book that's really warm and has really great characters, really well developed characters. It feels really honest and vulnerable, and I really enjoyed reading. And so I think that it would make sense for it to be on the shortlist compared to other books that I have read, on the long list, compared to other Booker books. Next, the second to last one here is a book that I have actually DNF'd. So I am this may be a bit out there, but it's Learwife by JR Thorpe, and I am kind of intending to reread this or to try it again, because I was reading a NetGalley e-arc, e-proof, whatever you call them. I was reading it as an ebook, and I don't really enjoy ebooks, so I think maybe the form was the reason I didn't like this, because Simon Hustle from Footnotes and Tangents on Bookstagram has been raving about how much he loves this, and I usually have quite similar taste to Simon, but I really didn't get on with this book when I was reading it, so it might just be me. But anyway, this is a retelling of King Lear, although, well, it's kind of like told at the end of King Lear. After the end of the play of King Lear, we see his wife, who has been in a monastery all this time, so it's set in a very different time period. King Lear is like pre-Christian, and this has been brought forward to early Christian England, and it's just about her experience of living in this monastery. JR Thorpe, again, is a poet, so there's a lot of language that's kind of quite experimental, weird, kind of jagged and uncomfortable to read. King Lear's wife kind of tries to encourage the women of the abbey into a competition for her approval, a contest that quickly devolves into savagery. Her narrative is interwoven with her memories as a queen and a mother who conceived a family plagued by madness, deceit and tragedy. So I'm not sure about this one, because like I said, I didn't get through it on the first attempt, but I think it's interesting enough that it might make it. And then the final one on my list is the only other one that I have read, and is definitely more on the commercial end, and that is Still Life by Sarah Winman. This is another big, long, chunky historical fiction I read last year, and I absolutely love this book. It was one of my favourite books of the year last year, about a guy named Ulysses who is a soldier during World War II, and he meets this woman who is related to the art world in some way, and she tells him to go to Florence because it will change his life, and when he's there he saves a man from jumping off a roof. And then after the war he goes back to the East End pub where he grew up, and he reunites with the big weird cast of characters who live there, and their kind of zany family, but one day he gets a letter from Florence to say that the man that he saved has now passed away and has left him his flat. And so he and his ex-wife's daughter and various other members of this extended strange family end up moving to Florence, and it's just about their life over the course of time, and also about the woman that he met as an artist. We go back and see her life as well, and it's beautiful, warm, hopeful, also like melancholy, doesn't hide away from the realities of life, queer novel about this time period. I absolutely loved it, and I think that it reminds me in some ways of The Great Circle, which was on the shortlist last year, which I, again, had problems with, but I think that it kind of fits that part. I don't know if there's necessarily a type of books that are always on the list, but I do think that if The Great Circle could be on the shortlist, then Still Life could also be on the long list, because they have a similar feeling, a similar style of writing, a kind of lush epicness to them, following one character's life that's slightly unconventional through the 20th century. Yeah, so there are various things about them that I think overlap, and means that Still Life could make it onto the list, even if it isn't quite as literary or experimental as some of the other books. But there you have it, 13 books that I think possibly, maybe, the Booker Prize will consider. I don't even know if these books have been submitted, so there's no way to know if they even have a chance, but I will see next week when it is released what the actual long list is, how well I did. I think there is potential that I will get 0 of them right, but there are usually lots of books I've never heard of, so that's going to cause an issue. Let me know in the comments down below what books you think will make it onto the Booker Prize shortlist, if any of these you have read, if you think they will. If you really disagree with me for any reason, I would love to hear it in the comments down below. Please remember to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and to subscribe. I put out new videos twice a week, sort of, and I will see you again very soon. Thank you for watching. Bye bye!